Massive escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war. Tuesday was the 1,000th day of the war when Russia invaded Ukraine, and after much deliberation on whether if long-range missiles should be used by Ukraine, which could escalate the entire situation, and Russia could respond not just within Ukraine but into the bordering areas, and we'll talk about the bordering countries as well and how they're now trying to fortify their boundaries, their areas, only because there could be a Russian response. But what really happened? Ukraine used long-range missiles called ATACMS. ATACMS. I've been trying to get this right, and I still got it wrong. ATACMS. Shiv Aroor joins me over here, senior editor with India Today Group. He will be explaining what these missiles really mean. But the fact that these missiles were used, the questions, Shiv, that we're asking today. What does it mean for the Russia-Ukraine war and the implications? Is this a desperate Biden who is a lame duck president and using his powers at a time when we're looking at Trump presidency to begin in January? And in the larger perspective of things with regards to Putin and with regards to Ukraine, where do things stand? Regional and global. Okay. So let's begin with the missiles itself. Yeah. What does this mean?
Okay, right. So let's take these things one at a time. Like you rightly pointed out, Geeta, the ATACMS is basically a short-range ballistic missile, even though it's a long-range weapon and longer range than anything that Ukraine has used so far. In terms of a conventional weapon against Russia. This is a short-range ballistic missile. ATACMS basically stands for Army Tactical Missile System. It's a very mundane full form, but the American weapons complex loves these names, you know, HIMARS and ATACMS and JDAM and things like that, which sound fancy.
And we have to, in our team, keep going to Shiv to ask how one to pronounce it, and then what does it really mean?
So it's like I said, it's a very mundane full form, but it's a reasonably sophisticated weapon. It's quite old actually, and it's nothing fancy. It's a long range guided. It's a short range guided ballistic missile with a range of, if I'm not mistaken, between 200 and 300 kilometers, which is not much at all. Because
but for Ukraine and Russia, it means a lot.
It means a lot because for two reasons. One, these missiles are American supplied. They've been given to Ukraine, and two, the two specific reasons why Putin will be, and we'll come to the Putin aspect in just a moment, why the use of this missile is going to be seen as an escalation is these missiles cannot be fired just by Ukrainian operators. They require American personnel to be part of the targeting and firing loop, which means that Putin gets to say this is an attack in which America participated directly. If they've got American military personnel, even though there's no practical evidence or proof of that, the general intelligence about the ATACMS system is that no training has been provided to the Ukrainians to actually operate this missile system, and therefore it would have needed American help.
That's a very interesting point, because at the beginning of the war itself and through the months, Shiv, Putin has been very clear that should there be a NATO ally or a NATO country involved in Ukraine, directly on Ukrainian soil, that amounts to Russia, that amounts to NATO actually fighting the war. And which brings me to the larger question. I was speaking to Alexander Dugin, advisor to informal, not officially, to President Putin, and he actually has been saying that this actually means a third world war, because if Russia starts looking at it as an attack by NATO, then we're looking at the European countries now. That's the reason why they're fortifying their boundaries.
So a couple of very important things before we get to the World War III aspect, Geeta, is this. Now, the obvious question that arises when one talks about how Ukraine has now fired these ATACMS missiles at Russia is how does this change the actual battlefield? And B, why did Biden actually clear them? He's got a couple of months left in office in the White House. Why make such a dramatic clearance of weapon use while he's on his way out as a lame duck, as you rightly said? Couple of reasons for that. One, we have to remember that the ATACMS missile system, the conditions under which it has to be used, it can only be fired into the Kursk region.
Okay.
Which you reported extensively from Ukraine, Geeta. So you know where Kursk is. It's the it's the Russian one of the Russian provinces just north of Ukraine, along the northern border, and it is a place where the Ukrainian army has managed to invade and take a sizable chunk of Russian territory.
Yes.
And the Ukrainians have successfully held that particular salient, which could perhaps be used as some kind of a bargaining chip. During a potential peace deal later, which we'll come to. But the more interesting point is the trigger for Biden allowing Ukraine to use these missiles or clearing the use of these missiles is also the fact that 10,000 North Korean soldiers supplied by Kim Jong-un are in Kursk helping the Russians try and dislodge.
They're in Kursk as we speak.
They're in Kursk as we speak, helping Putin's army try to dislodge the Ukrainian forces.
But is that a reason or just an excuse?
I think it's an excuse. I think
because I don't see a reason. I mean, the North Koreans have been there in Russia for a while, and there is no reason that Biden should have done this at this point in time.
I think Biden,
and Trump will walk back on this one.
I think Biden is trying to complicate things for Trump as much as he possibly can. I just read a column, by an Indian columnist just before this broadcast, where he actually called it strategic malpractice. Which is a very strong use of words, but it rings true. When you've got 2 months left in office, when there is no real tactical provocation, you've seen the war firsthand, you've seen it closer than most people have, Geeta, and you know that especially in the last 1 year, 1,000 days gone, and especially in the last 1 year, this war has become a kind of grinding war.
Oh, yes.
Where territory is being held. There are no dramatic escalations in terms of military activity apart from the use of aircraft and artillery and things like that, and therefore like you rightly said, the existence of or the deployment of North Korean forces doesn't seem like a big enough trigger to green flag such a big weaponry escalation. So I think Biden is trying to spite Trump. I think he's trying to muddy the waters just before he goes, because he knows that Trump has been extremely strident. You were in the US, you heard Trump say those things, that he's going to walk back on all of these things. He's going to try and force some kind of a peace deal. And that's also one of the reasons why I think the Ukrainians are being very aggressive about Kursk right now.
And that's the reason why there's a very strong move by Russia, which is changing and amending the nuclear doctrine. We'll talk about that, but before that, there is another aspect, Shiv, on why Biden has cleared these long-range missiles or the tactical weapons. Winter is setting in. There is going to be no ground war. We've seen that last time around as well. They waited for the permafrost, which would be around February. So this is the only way that Ukraine can retaliate at a time when you will not have America support the Ukrainian war come January.
There's the amount of strategic and tactical uncertainty that Zelensky's military currently faces is there for everyone to see. There is a palpable sense of volatility, turbulence, uncertainty over what's going to happen. Trump is already making sort of quasi-policy claims about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. It's actually kind of unsettling. So imagine what it's going to be like once he's in the Oval Office, right?
Absolutely.
So I think Zelensky right now is trying to get clarity on a number of things and make as many moves as he possibly can, because I think he senses that once Trump comes in, given how unpredictable and forceful he is and disruptive he is about even things as complicated as diplomacy and due process, etc., he probably is sensing that you're going to have this big no nonsense kind of American president come in and say, I promised I was going to bring peace on this thing, and here's where the deadline is going to be, and he's going to force some kind of a peace deal between the two countries.
But then, Shiv, all this using of these weapons, taking the permission from Biden and doing what he's doing is not going to stand him in good stead with Trump, because Trump will be very unhappy with what he's done right now and how he's complicated matters further.
About Zelensky.
Zelensky. For what Zelensky has done will not stand him in good stead. Trump is unhappy. His team has made that very clear with what's happening right now, and the moment he comes, he's not going to be or play nice with Zelensky.
I don't think he's going to waste time on that. You're absolutely right. Even Mike Waltz, the incoming national security advisor, expressed a degree of surprise about the clearance of the use of these ATACMS missiles against the Ukraine. But I think the reality of what's happening right now. Okay, as far as January is concerned, when Trump takes over, we can assume that from January onwards there will be an effort towards a peace settlement between Ukraine and Russia, where there will be very, very tough diplomatic negotiations. Trump will foist himself as some kind of a global interlocutor between the two sides and a bringer of peace, as it were, which is a role that I think he's very much looking forward to as well. but the point is, 2 months is a hell of a long time in a war that has already completed 1,000 days. You were there for months together, Geeta, and you know what a few months actually means. The entire Donetsk region is under Russian control right now.
Oh, it's not going back.
It's not going to go back. There is no clarity about what's going to happen. The Russians have basically said the Ukrainian forces over there need to completely withdraw. Ukraine currently holds the Kursk region, which is where they're launching these ATACMS weapons into. The Russians have been simply unable to dislodge the Ukrainians from there, and it's a real bargaining chip that Zelensky's military has managed to get.
But Shiv, I think what the real bargaining chip, and people don't realize that, is not Kursk. It is the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is still under Russian control.
I was coming to that. I was coming to that. Not just Zaporizhia, but other energy center points in Ukraine are going to be bargaining chips. But the other thing we've got to remember very, very clearly is that the fact that Putin, who finds himself in a much more comfortable position now that you've got an incoming Trump administration, has felt emboldened enough to change nuclear doctrine.
Let's come to that.
2 months before a new president takes over in the White House. Shows you how volatile things actually are.
But is he going nuclear?
I don't look. The thing is, when we say is someone going nuclear, it's so completely unthinkable as a proposition. World War III, is a phrase that has been used more intimately in the Russia-Ukraine conflict than any other conflict, because Russia is the second largest, I think the world's second largest, operator of nuclear weapons. And as we've seen in simulations since 2022, when the war began, a tactical Russian nuclear retaliation against a NATO country is not beyond the realm of imagination. There are even limited tactical nuclear exchanges that could take place between NATO and Russia, which don't conflagrate into a global sort of war.
How not?
Which is unthinkable in itself. No,
if it is not going to be Ukraine, and if European countries are fortifying themselves because they know that should there be a nuclear response, it's not going to be just Ukraine. Russia is not foolish enough to just
these nuclear responses may not even be at Ukraine. They may be at those NATO members which are firing these weapons.
That exactly is the point. And for America, it's convenient, and I keep saying this, Shiv, because they're so far away. It's the countries bordering Ukraine who would suffer the biggest losses. And while they stand in public supporting Ukraine, in private, please ask any country whether they'd be okay with Ukraine joining the NATO.
Correct.
Or European Union. Where is the reluctance coming from? Why is Ukraine still not a part of EU or NATO? Is because of the reluctance from these very countries. Poland, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, they're all fortifying their borders. Why so? So they are at great risk, and nobody can afford a war. Nobody wants a single bomb on their soil.
Absolutely. I mean, after 1,000 days, I think a great many home truths and realities about the dynamic in Europe have become very clear to countries like, Poland, Germany, and many others, which are close by, which had a much more aggressive stance initially. They've, I won't say they've backpedaled, but things are a little bit more temperate
Realigned.
now.
Realign themselves.
Everyone's got a reality check about where things can go. It is very important while we talk about World War III and nuclear doctrines being tweaked in order to ease the use of nuclear weapons from Russia's side. While it does sound worrying and does sound belligerent, we have to remember that Russian nuclear saber rattling has happened many times.
That's true.
Even in the last 1,000 days, how many times have we heard Lavrov
and from Moscow, and from Moscow
Putin himself,
yes,
or their various other officials say things like let's not discount the nuclear option, or we have nuclear weapons, or things like that, or in this case doing it more subtly but obviously more directly by officially changing nuclear doctrine and making the use of those weapons more
because things
available.
have changed on the ground.
That's true, but the point is, you have to understand that for the Russians, the use of the ATACMS doesn't qualitatively change the battlefield. There were some Russian reports that said most of the missiles that were launched were intercepted. One of them hit some kind of a base. There were no injuries or no casualties on the ground. But it is the quality of the use of that weapon, the fact that it has been directly cleared by the United States, the fact that it is almost certain that Ukraine cannot operate these missiles by themselves,
so
which means Americans are involved. I find that a little weird, honestly speaking, Geeta, because the ATACMS is a true blue American weapon. It's very unlikely that they could have been fired without American help. But I'm wondering about all of the other weapons that have been pumped in from countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and the US into Ukraine. You've got the small diameter bombs, you've got JDAMs, you've got something called the HIMARS, which is
how are they operating them?
Yeah, high mobility artillery rocket system. You've got Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles, which haven't been cleared for use just yet. You've got a number of other small and large advanced missile systems, which I don't think the Ukrainians are using completely by themselves.
Yeah.
So
they can't. They've not been trained.
Has Russia, chosen to ignore the use of earlier weapons because it's difficult to prove? Have they decided to ratchet up tensions in the nuclear level because ATACMS is a much more visible, more prominent, aggressive kind of weapon system? That seems unclear to me, but I think
also the motive, the fact that there are North Koreans there, and you're focusing on Kursk, a region that has been taken,
and the pressure
and
of
you have
time,
foreigners,
and the pressure of time.
Yeah, and the pressure of time.
I think the 2-month deadline is weighing not just on Zelensky but on Putin as well. Yes, Putin feels more comfortable. Yes, he's kind of chuffed now that there's going to be a friendly face in the White House, as it were. But he too knows that if he's got to get all his ducks in a row, he needs to do it now, because many things sort of Putin will never say this, the Russians will never admit this, but many things go out of Russia's hands starting January.
That's true.
As far as negotiations and diplomacy are concerned.
Meanwhile, what's happening in Ukraine is that the US embassy has shut down its embassy, and has asked Americans to leave Ukraine, which is a warning. Shiv, before I let you go, just last bit before the war began, and we all thought it was not going to happen. Russia was not going to invade. There was only one country. We got it wrong. Our intelligence absolutely failed. Everybody, including Europe. But there's one country that kept saying, no, Russia is going to invade, and it was America. Through and through, Blinken just a week ago said, we have intelligence that Russia is going to invade. And they did. And now Ukraine, they're asking their citizens to evacuate. They're shutting down the embassy, which really means that there is something that's brewing. Is it going to be a very cold, yet very heated winter for Russia, Ukraine? Or are we going to look at a lull before the Trump presidency?
Let me end by asking you a question, Geeta, since because you've had the unique position of having reported in Ukraine as well as Russia during the war. You've just come back from the United States and you're completely plugged into the Indian Foreign Office and the system here. So Putin's heading to India. We don't know the dates just yet, but he's coming. It's going to be one of his first few trips since the war began. He's been to China, Kyrgyzstan, Central Europe and things like that.
Friendly countries.
Yeah, Central Asian countries, but he can't go to so many other countries. What is his India trip going to be about? I mean,
it's a very important one, and good that you ask, and good that we're ending it with diplomacy.
So
the fact that India is maybe one of the rare G20 nations, apart from China, that actually made the visit to Russia for the annual bilateral summit. And we've had this annual bilateral summit. It is an ongoing, continued thing which has not seen a break, barring the 2020 war year. No, and the 2024 war year. 2023 or 24? 22, right?
Yeah.
So 22 war year, not because of the pandemic, more so to do with the war. That's when we saw a break, and then we did see Prime Minister Modi go to Russia, not once but twice over, for the bilateral summit and then for the BRICS summit. And President Putin will be coming and it happens once in India and once in Russia.
Correct.
So it's India's turn to host the annual summit, and which is what he's going to come here for. So there's a lot on the agenda, not just economic, trade, which has become very big between India and Russia. In fact, India and Russia are two countries that have become major factors, apart from China, in the de-dollarization of the oil economy. And so that will be a major conversation. There will be a lot to do with defense, although we have moved a lot from the Russian weapon systems to Western weapon systems, but does not mean that we are going to abandon Russia and the
we'll
military
be
cooperation.
Throwing them a few deals this time as well.
That's true. And then nuclear power projects. That's going to be big on the agenda. So there's a lot on the agenda, but it's not about the bilateral. It's about Putin coming to India.
Absolutely.
It's a major messaging. Before that, Putin couldn't come. There was a lot of pressure on India not to host. But I think with the change in government in DC, a lot has changed there. And so an announcement, an early announcement, this is going to happen next year. In 2025, but an early announcement itself goes to show that there's a boost. There, everybody feels emboldened. Nobody feels the pressure of having to or not having to engage with Moscow anymore. And so I suppose there will be an early announcement of a Putin visit to India.
It sounds good. I'm looking forward to that because like you said, I think it's going to be interesting to see because after the Trump victory, many of the dynamics have changed.
Geopolitics will change. The landscape, the geopolitical landscape is going to change so fast. You would not know what's hitting you, because it's not just the Russia-Ukraine war. A lot is going to change in West Asia. Imagine, we've had a peace summit with no conclusion. There's going to be a second peace conference, is what Zelensky's said, and has invited India. I'm sure that will also yield no result. But if there's a peace summit that Trump hosts, that certainly might find some solutions in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He's also going to look at the West Asian crisis. We'll talk about that maybe, another day. But yes, a Trump return to the White House is going to change a lot on the ground for Russia-Ukraine. For now, we're seeing a very desperate Biden administration trying to do all they can for the Ukraine administration, for Zelensky. But how much will that really last, and how long will that last with winter setting in, is something we'll have to wait and see. With that, thank you so much for watching Shiv and I reporting on the decisions made by DC and how it's going to impact not just the region when it comes to Russia or Ukraine, but also global politics. Thank you for watching India Today Global.